The role of law enforcement has been increasing and increasing and increasing. Seizures have been increased, and there's been a lot of focus on it. As I've said before this audience in the past, the question is, how did we get here? And there's some very real, very simple, very obvious business dynamics at play. And Thomas Friedman, who wrote a book called The World is Flat quite a few years ago, it's the perfect textbook to understand how counterfeit components happen. Globalization, communication tools, the fact that you can ship anything anywhere via FedEx or UPS, all these things made for a global market. And in a global market, there's discontinuous and disingenuous legal cooperation. So things like the admittance of China into the World Trade Organization allowed anyone to export from anywhere in China to pretty much anywhere. In addition to it, there's this whole change and transition that happened in business with improved business processes, as Mr. Gates has made us so successful because of the internet, Microsoft Office, Word, and Windows. You know, these are things that allowed us to very easily increase standardization and document it. And also, this business trend pushed for profit and pushed for cost reduction. So as you get cost reduction out there, you're going to get counterfeit components. And just kind of a globally speaking notion, this is not unique to our industry, and it's something that's facing everyone. In terms of counterfeit enablers, everybody's enabling counterfeit. Everybody, everywhere, and through the U.S. Department of Commerce, this is a fantastic, fantastic document. They found that every segment of our industry has been touched by counterfeit components, and nobody's 100% innocent. The challenge is, how do we change this trend, and how do we act responsibly and intelligently? So in terms of avoidance, there's some really kind of obvious, simple things that can be done immediately, and we're hoping that through cooperation of industry, government, we'll be able to get to a point where this is not the issue it currently is. So initial thoughts on counterfeit avoidance. It's expensive. And there's the business principle, the notion of the power of 1%. And if you could trim 1% of your expenses, you will typically generate 5 to 6 to 7% increase in your net profitability. So business leaders every day are trying to minimize expenses. And as you look through this example, this is a hypothetical example of a franchise distributor who might be doing about $14.6 billion in revenue, who might have about X number of employees, and they might want to spend some money training their entire staff on counterfeit components. It's expensive. And that short-term goal, that power of 1%, is something that motivates Wall Street and financial markets. In terms of, and that's your short-term goal. The long-term goal is really to build a better organization and to manage this risk, and that's that expense that I keep talking about. In terms of independent distribution, we look at it slightly differently. We know that that one transaction, that one escapement, that can potentially put us out of business. So we're willing to meet that long-term goal at all costs. Standards also matter, and this is something that's been quite successful, even as recently as getting international and European participation in the G19 committee. In terms of vendor management, the most important thing is know thy vendor. And ideally, in an ideal world, there should be a two-tiered approach to vendor management. One being traditional performance monitoring, do they deliver on time and accurately? The second piece is a vendor risk assessment. You have to know, based on each vendor you're purchasing from, what's your risk of getting a counterfeit component. So in terms of, that's vendor management, then you need to add this component of what I call procurement risk management, which this is where you get procurement to talk to quality, to talk to production and engineering, where you need to understand what your end application is and the amount of risk you're willing or able to take versus the source of supply that you're buying from. So in the ideal world, for the very low risk applications, do you need to be spending the additional time, money, and effort on major counterfeit screening, or do you just need to get something that works to facilitate a short-term goal? On the flip side, as you have life-critical flight applications, this is where you really want to understand that source of supply. As I look at things mathematically, you could kind of create a method of scoring and ranking each one of these. So as you take your vendor risk, multiply it by a procurement risk, you understand inspection complexity. Inspection complexity is something that's from as simple as paperwork verification to as complex as full electrical and burn-in testing. This is something you'll find in your proceedings, and I would really encourage you, if you're curious to learn more about this subject, to take a look at really the details of this transition. I point to 1992 as one of the starting points, which is this was when the Basel Convention was put into force. Unfortunately, and I apologize for my nation, one of the three countries that has still not ratified the Basel Convention is the United States, and we share company with Haiti and Afghanistan. Basically, we're sending our e-waste to foreign countries so they could recycle it and have the raw materials to send counterfeit components back to us. 2001, China's admitted to the World Trade Organization, and as you can see in my timeline here, not so much happened. As you start to look into the future, and you start to look in the more recent history, this is where you're seeing standards released. This is where you're seeing arrests made. This is where you're seeing training happening, documents published, government research. It's fantastic that our government, law enforcement, and industry is starting to take this seriously. As you look through this and as you take it home, there are a couple of documents referenced here which I would really encourage you and challenge you to read if you would like to learn more about this issue in this organization. In terms of best practices, and this is this OTE, the Office of Technology Evaluation. In terms of best practices, independent distribution is an absolute necessity. If you're supporting products that go on for years and years and years after the component manufacturers stop producing the components, you need independent distribution. It's unrealistic not to be ever buying from independent distribution. So the challenge is put together a policy where you know what you're buying and you're able to do adequate inspection. A very simple conclusion. It's a real and insidious problem. It exists. Nobody's unaffected by it, and anyone who does say they're unaffected by it is probably not being totally honest with their organization and their practices. There are policies and standards and tools for risk mitigation. They exist. Put them into place. And at the very end of the day, only buy from trusted, vested, and visionary partners. Up on the screen here, this is a list of the 35 members and our one associate member. We're very proud of our organization, and we hope that you would trust us to supply components to industry in the future. Once again, I'd really like to thank Ian Blackman and the COG and the attendees for the opportunity to present in this non-traditional fashion. And for those of you who know me, you knew that I would have to put my own little spin, and a big challenge to make sure that you watched until the very end, stayed awake and paid attention. So with that, enjoy your evening, thank you all, and have a wonderful day.